Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at something that's super important, especially if you're new to Israel.
Definitely.
The Israeli life insurance system.
Yes. And it can be a little bit overwhelming at first. You know, there's so much to figure out, but
Yeah.
we're going to break it down.
Absolutely. Like, what even is it? Where do we start?
Yeah.
It seems like there are like three main types that we need to kind of get our heads around, right?
Right.
There's one that's linked to your pension.
Right.
And then there's private life insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this whole thing with mortgage insurance.
Exactly. So it's like a three-pronged approach to making sure you and your family are protected.
Okay, so let's unpack these one by one, I guess.
Yeah.
So the pension one, it seems like most people who are working here, they just automatically get this coverage.
Yeah, it's like a built-in safety net. When you start contributing to your pension, a portion of that automatically goes towards life insurance.
Okay, that makes sense. But how much are we talking about here? Is it enough to actually support a family if something were to happen?
That's the big question, isn't it? The coverage is calculated based on your salary, but it might not be enough to cover everything.
Especially long term.
Exactly, especially long term. And that's where private life insurance comes in.
Okay, so that's like the second layer, right?
Yeah, think of it as like a customizable layer. You can tailor it to your specific needs, your income, and
So if the pension one isn't quite enough, the private one can kind of fill in those gaps.
precisely, it's all about creating that safety net that gives you real peace of mind.
Okay, so that makes sense. But what about these discounts I keep hearing about with life insurance? Are there any catches there?
Yes. The discounts, you have to be careful with those big upfront discounts because sometimes they expire after a few years.
Oh, so it's not all it's cracked up to be.
Right. It's like a short-term sugar rush.
Yeah.
Then you're stuck with a much higher premium later on.
So you got to read the fine print, basically.
Absolutely. Prioritize those consistent, affordable rates over the flashy deals.
Solid advice. Okay, so we've covered pension and private. Now let's tackle this mortgage insurance thing. What is that all about?
Mortgage insurance is specifically tied to your home loan. It ensures that your family can stay in your home even if something happens to you.
So the bank is the beneficiary on that one.
That's right. It protects their investment, but it also protects your family's home.
Okay, so is this something that's mandatory or is it optional?
In most cases, when you take out a mortgage, the bank will require you to have mortgage insurance.
Okay, so we've got these three main players, the pension one, the private one, and the mortgage-specific one. What's the best way for someone to figure out, like, their own personal strategy?
I would say start by assessing your own situation, your family's needs, your income, your mortgage,
All right.
and then compare all three options carefully. Look at the coverage amounts, look at the premium costs, and think long-term.
Think long-term affordability.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, right?
Absolutely.
The more you understand, the better decisions you can make.
Okay, so we've got the basics down the foundation of our insurance fortress. But let's get into the nitty-gritty.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about the pension link insurance first. How are those coverage amounts actually determined?
Well, it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. It's based on a formula that takes into account your age, your salary, and how long you've been contributing to the pension fund.
So if you're younger and just starting out, your coverage might be lower initially?
Yeah, exactly. But the longer you contribute and the more your salary grows, the more that coverage builds up over time.
Okay, so it's not just set it and forget it. You really need to kind of check in on that pension policy every now and then, make sure it's still working for you.
Absolutely. Now, what about private life insurance? You mentioned different types of policies earlier. What's the deal with those?
Yeah, I was wondering about that, like the fixed versus adjustable premiums. Like,
Oh, yeah.
what are the pros and cons of each one?
Well, fixed premiums, they give you that predictability. It's a set rate, what you're paying.
Yeah.
But the downside is it might not account for inflation.
Right. So you're guaranteed that rate, but it might not be enough down the road.
Exactly. Now, adjustable premiums, they might start lower, but they could increase as you get older.
Oh, so there's a bit of a gamble there.
There is a bit of a gamble. It's like riding a wave. It has its ups and downs.
So you're basically weighing affordability now versus maybe higher costs later on.
Precisely. And that's where a good insurance advisor can really come in handy. They can help you weigh those options and figure out what's best for your situation.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now let's circle back to those discounts for a second.
Yeah.
Are there any specific red flags that we should watch out for?
Definitely one thing to be wary of is what we call front-loaded discounts.
Front-loaded?
Yeah, you get this big discount for the first few years, and then the premium jumps up significantly.
Oh, wow. So it's like a bait and switch kind of thing.
Kind of. It's important to look at the long-term cost, not just the initial price tag.
Okay, so consistent and predictable is better than a flashy discount.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about mortgages for a second. Mortgage insurance is usually a requirement, But what if someone's on a tight budget and they're finding it hard to afford?
Yeah, that's a real concern for a lot of people.
One option to consider is what's called decreasing term insurance.
Decreasing term. I haven't heard of that one.
So with decreasing term insurance, the coverage amount actually decreases over time as you pay down your mortgage.
Oh, so the premiums go down too as you pay off the loan.
Exactly. It's a way to tailor your coverage to your specific needs and your budget.
That's pretty clever.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like there are definitely options out there, but it's all about doing your research and figuring out what works best for your own situation.
Absolutely. And don't hesitate to talk to a financial advisor or an insurance expert.
Yeah, they can help you navigate all this stuff.
Exactly. They're there to guide you.
All right, well, this has been super helpful.
Yeah.
I feel like we've laid a really good groundwork here.
I think so too.
We've kind of explored all these different types of life insurance in Israel.
Yeah.
So what do you say we take a quick break, and then when we come back, we can dive into some real life scenarios.
Sounds good to me.
All right, we'll be right back after this. All right, so we're back, and we've got our insurance foundation all set. But now let's talk about some real life scenarios.
Okay. Yeah, let's get practical.
So let's say you're a young couple, just starting out, maybe thinking about starting a family. What are some of the key insurance things to consider at this stage?
Well, it's all about building that safety net early on, right? Especially when you're laying the groundwork for a family. First things first, make sure you both have that life insurance coverage through your pension plans.
Right, that basic coverage that we talked about.
Exactly. That's a good starting point. But then you want to think about adding another layer of protection. Even a small private life insurance policy can make a huge difference, especially if one of you were to pass away suddenly. Think about things like covering debts, childcare costs, or just being able to maintain your lifestyle.
So even if you're on a tight budget right now, it's still really important to have at least some life insurance.
Absolutely. It's about that peace of mind, knowing that your partner, your future kids are going to be okay.
Okay. That makes sense. Now, let's fast forward a little bit.
Okay.
Imagine you're a family with young kids.
Yeah.
You've just bought your first home. What are the insurance priorities now?
Well, now you've got that mortgage, which is a big commitment. So mortgage insurance becomes a major factor.
Right, because that's usually required by the bank.
Exactly. It's there to protect your family, make sure they can stay in the home. But you also want to reassess your private life insurance coverage at this point.
Why is that? Why reassess?
Well, think about it. Your financial responsibilities have grown. You've got the mortgage. The kids are getting bigger. There might be other debts like car loans, credit cards.
Right.
So your life insurance needs to kind of keep pace with all of that.
So as your life gets more complex,
Yeah.
your insurance needs to get more complex too.
Exactly. You might want to increase your coverage amount to make sure your family can maintain their lifestyle, cover education expenses, all of that.
Okay, now let's shift gears again and think about people who are getting closer to retirement. What are the insurance things to focus on at that stage of life?
Well, as you approach retirement, your focus might shift a little bit, from replacing income to maybe preserving your assets, leaving a legacy.
Okay.
You might consider reducing your life insurance coverage as you pay off your debts, the kids become financially independent. But life insurance can still be useful for estate planning, providing liquidity to cover things like estate taxes.
Right. So even in retirement, it still has a role to play.
Absolutely. It's about adapting your insurance strategy as your life changes.
Now, I have a question that I bet a lot of people are wondering about. What if you have pre-existing health conditions? Can you still get life insurance?
That's a great question. And the good news is you usually can, but it might take a bit more effort. Insurance companies, they're going to look at your health history and they might adjust your premiums or offer you what's called a modified policy.
A modified policy? What does that mean?
So it means the coverage might be a little bit different or there might be certain exclusions, maybe a waiting period before the coverage kicks in for that specific condition.
Okay, so it's worth looking into even if you have a pre-existing condition.
Absolutely. Now, can we clear up something that often causes confusion, the difference between life insurance and health insurance?
Yes, please, because those terms get thrown around a lot.
They do, and they sound similar, but they serve very different purposes.
Right.
Life insurance provides a lump sum payment to your beneficiaries if you pass away. Health insurance covers your medical expenses while you're alive and kicking.
So one is for after you're gone and the other is for while you're here.
Exactly. They're both important parts of a solid financial plan.
Okay. And speaking of life insurance and who gets the money, let's talk about beneficiaries for a second.
Yes, beneficiaries are crucial. These are the people or entities who receive the payout when you pass away.
Right. You need to choose them very carefully.
Absolutely. And make sure to keep them updated as your life changes. You can name individuals, trusts, charities. It's really up to you.
So it's all about making sure that the money goes exactly where you want it to go.
Precisely. Now let's move on to some tips for choosing the right policy.
Okay.
Have you ever heard the phrase, buy term and invest the difference?
I have, but honestly, I'm not really sure what it means.
Okay, so term life insurance provides coverage for a specific period of time, like 10, 20, 30 years, and it's usually much cheaper than permanent life insurance, which covers you for your entire life.
So term is like renting coverage for a set time, and permanent is like owning it.
That's a great analogy. The buy term and invest the difference idea is basically this: buy the more affordable term insurance and then invest the money you save on premiums in things like stocks or bonds.
So you're basically betting that you can do better with your own investments.
Exactly. It gives you more control and flexibility, but it does require some financial savvy.
Okay, so it's not the right strategy for everyone, but it's something to consider.
Definitely. And here's another tip shop around: compare quotes from different insurance companies.
Don't just go with the first one you find.
Exactly. They all use different formulas, so rates can vary quite a bit. It's worth doing your homework.
And don't be afraid to negotiate. Sometimes you can get a better deal.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about some common mistakes people make with life insurance.
Okay, let's hear about those pitfalls so we can avoid them.
One of the biggest mistakes is waiting too long to get life insurance.
Why is that a problem?
Well, as you get older, the chances of health problems increase, and so do your premiums.
Right.
Plus, you just never know what life has in store, so it's better to get covered sooner rather than later.
Don't procrastinate.
Yeah.
What are some other common mistakes?
Another big one is not getting enough coverage. People often underestimate how much their family would actually need to cover expenses, maintain their lifestyle.
So don't just go for the cheapest option if it's not going to be enough.
Exactly. And another mistake is failing to review your policy regularly.
Right. Life changes, things happen.
Exactly. You need to make sure your coverage is keeping up with those changes.
So review it at least once a year or whenever something major happens.
Exactly. Now, before we move on to our final part, let's do a quick recap.
Okay, so we started by looking at those three main types of life insurance in Israel: the pension-linked one, the private one, and the mortgage insurance. We talked about figuring out your needs, assessing your finances, comparing the different policies.
Right. We also looked at different scenarios, like being a young couple, a family with kids, someone nearing retirement, and what insurance looks like at each stage.
We tackled those common questions about pre-existing conditions, the difference between life and health insurance, and choosing beneficiaries.
And we gave some tips on choosing the right policy, avoiding those common mistakes.
Okay, so lots of good stuff covered, but there's still more to come.
That's right. Join us for the final part of our deep dive. We'll wrap things up and answer any lingering questions you might have.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're in the home stretch now, wrapping up our exploration of Israeli life insurance.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the types of insurance to those potential pitfalls to watch out for.
Definitely. But before we wrap up, I really want to emphasize something we touched on earlier, which is the importance of getting expert advice.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's so easy to get overwhelmed with all the different options and the jargon and everything.
It really is. It's like trying to navigate a new city without a map.
Right, exactly.
A financial advisor or an insurance agent, they can be your guide. They can make sure you're getting the right coverage at a price that you can actually afford.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something else that I think sometimes gets overlooked.
Okay.
And that is regularly reviewing your life insurance policy.
Oh, that's so important.
It's not a set it and forget it kind of thing, right?
No, not at all. Life is constantly changing. You get married, you have kids, you buy a house, you change jobs.
Right, all these big life events.
Exactly, and your insurance needs to keep up with those changes.
So review it at least once a year or whenever something major happens.
Absolutely. You might need to adjust your coverage amount, update your beneficiaries, maybe even consider a different type of policy altogether.
Okay, so it's all about making sure your insurance strategy is still aligned with your life and your goals.
Precisely. Now I'm sure everyone's wondering, how much does all this actually cost?
Yeah, that's the big question, right?
It is, and unfortunately there's no easy answer.
Figured as much.
Because the cost of life insurance, it depends on so many factors: your age, your health, your lifestyle, the amount of coverage you need, the type of policy you choose.
It's very personalized.
It is, but here's the good news. It's often more affordable than people think, especially if you're young and healthy.
Okay, that's good to know.
There are definitely affordable options out there, and a good insurance advisor can help you find the best value for your money.
Excellent advice. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, let's leave our listeners with some key takeaways.
Okay.
What are the most important things for them to remember?
Well, first and foremost, remember that life insurance is a crucial part of a solid financial plan. It's about protecting your loved ones, providing that financial security.
Right, giving them that peace of mind.
Exactly. And second, take the time to really understand those different types of life insurance out there and choose the one that makes the most sense for you.
Do your research.
Exactly. Third, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
A financial advisor or an insurance agent can be a valuable resource.
They're there to guide you.
Exactly. And finally, remember that life insurance is not a one-time decision. It's something you need to revisit and review as your life changes.
It's like a checkup for your financial health.
Well said.
Yeah.
All right, so with that, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into Israeli life insurance.
We have. And I hope our listeners feel a little bit more informed and empowered.
Me too.
So thanks for joining us on the deep dive. And remember, knowledge is power when it comes to making smart financial decisions.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone.